Hello, everyone, and welcome to This Week in Hospitality Marketing, live show number 309. I am starting alone today, which is a unique difference to our normal cadre of folks that are usually in the green room with me to get started. Apologize for the little Band-Aid here. I made up a great ninja story. Saw 5, didn't see the 6 or something, but actually it's just going to a dermatologist and all that stuff. Hey, Miss Adele Gubman, how are you? Uh-oh, I don't hear you. There is no audio, Dothwith. Um, time for technology to kick in. I did hear a vicious rumor that Mr. Tim Peter was going to join us. My God, it is the one, the mysterious Mr. Tim Peter. How are you, sir?
I am delightful. How are you, Lauren?
I almost wanted to bake a cake when I saw that you were going to pop in for the first half hour. I was like, oh, my
first hour, actually. Hour.
It's like Christmas. Hey, just for the record, not that I don't appreciate Adele. Adele, don't take this, just, but Tim, it's been one of those weeks where because we do the Clubhouse thing and everything Monday through Thursday.
Yeah.
I am so much in a listening mode.
Things like this, so people know we're.
I think. There we go. Okay, I don't know why that would be the case, but apparently it is. It was being put on mute.
I just think it was funny that you said you were. I think it was funny you said I've been in listen mode, and then literally all the sound cut out.
And back to you, Tim.
Except my sound cut out too. So yeah. Oh, and we've lost Adele.
That's bizarre. Maybe Adele was trying to fix her audio or something because she came in without audio or anything like this. I was just apologizing for my little Band-Aid on the face. I made up a great ninja story. I'm actually trying to decide, should I go with the ninja story or a pirate theme thing like, but I don't know.
So, it's funny. I know a person. This is a bizarre tangent. Has nothing to do with hospitality. But I went to high school with a guy who was from Vietnam, right? So I went to high school in the 80s. His family came over. They were the boat people, which of course you may remember from back then. Mm-hmm. And he told a story about a scary story, but when we were 14, we thought it was the coolest thing ever of having to fend off pirates as they were sailing across the South China Sea to freedom and the like. So I know somebody who met actual pirates, and apparently they're not as cool as they are in the movies.
No, I don't think they'd be the cool ones. No, they definitely romanticize it. Adele, let's do your audio check. You there? No,
there's no audio, Adele.
You are audioless today. You're going to have to do the puppet thing again.
Maybe Adele, just try unplugging it and replugging it. That sometimes does the trick.
Yeah. No,
it's sort of the reboot and start over.
It's the reboot of the world. Hey, so it's just a joy. How's the world been? What has been on your front of your plate? What have you been looking at? What are some of your perspectives of how things are going? I mean, gosh, I got 1,000 questions as to how things have been.
Well, first of all, everything is wonderful. I am in a good boat in that most of my clients, pretty much all of my clients, happen to sit in markets that are doing well, in chain scales that are doing well, and are the types of properties that are doing well. So I have some friends who work for, big boxes in city centers in New York, for instance, and they're struggling, right? But most of my clients tend to be in markets that are in demand, tend to be, upscale or luxury properties, and what am I missing? And tend to be leisure oriented. So they're in the sweet spot of the kinds of properties that are actually doing very well right now. One of my clients literally is almost $1 million ahead of 2019, and that's not year to date. Damn. That is through the first 6 months. They've already put almost $1 million on the books above what they did in 2019. But first of all, I'm going to take a little bit of a victory lap on that for things we did during the pandemic, and also have to fully recognize that that is not what we did. That is, they're the right kind of property in the right kind of market, right? So from my perspective, things are good, but I also recognize my perspective is skewed because there's all kinds of properties in all kinds of situations, right?
I'm going to try this. Say it again. Say it again.
There we go. Hello, Adele.
We got
Oh my
Adele.
goodness.
Yay. Okay. Well, that is, and yes, from a client's perspective, I've also been very fortunate. We lost a lot of clients that had to literally physically shut down. They were just told they had to shut down.
Right.
But,
as did I. I had a client who I worked with for quite a long time, unfortunately, who decided that the best thing to do was sell the assets. So I mean but that was 6 months ago. So I'm only looking at where we are in 2021.
Yeah, and as much as we'd love to say, hey, we had a hand in it, we just like to say we had a hand in it. It's like, you know what, I think the combination of admonishing decent advice, taking on what you could do, and really handling all the other things that we don't have an influence on, they've been very, very, very good at surviving and thriving in some ways. We've had clients that have thrived through the process because a lot of competitors didn't, and that opened up the space for them even farther, and they were in a position that they could continue to expand their value proposition to market. So it worked out well in that sense. And now that the market has come back to what it is, this tsunami of things in some regions, it's only even been more exacerbated where it's like, yeah, Lauren, listen, don't talk to me.
Well, yeah. And I mean, if I can take one very small victory lap, and I want to be really clear about this, so much of the properties that are doing well who I work with is systemic, right? It's environmental. It's nothing that we're specifically doing. What I will say we did well, and when I say we, I mean the client and I. It's not just my team or not just what we do, but they all committed early on to things like, we're going to be really smart about rate. We're not going to deeply discount even during the pandemic because this is not being driven by economics. This is being driven by other factors. And we're going to be really smart about, if we're going to do any kind of discounting, it's going to be done as pure distressed inventory to pure closed user groups with a pure rationale behind it of, hey, here's a loyal customer sale. You have been a very loyal customer to us. Here's something we're doing for you as a gift, which has made it easier to push rate when things came back. And so pretty much across the board, they are indexing above the market in terms of RevPAR because they didn't deeply discount during the pandemic and the like. Right. Now, again, that was something I advised them and all. That was something we worked really hard on. I'm also not the one who had to pay the note every month, so it was a real leap of faith on their part to commit to that and say, nope, we're gonna stay the course there and try to be really smart about how we message any kind of discounting we do and try to do as little as possible. And it did help that when they help prove the point that when they did it, they weren't getting any benefit from it anyway, right? The couple times they did it, they were like, "Oh, that looks just like last weekend," and we're maybe we shouldn't do that. So, but I think it's a valuable lesson from any downturn, right? Is the reason it is hard to push rate when you come out of a downturn is because you've typically cut rates so heavily during the downturn. It's very hard to say, we were charging you $179 and now we're going to charge you $549. That's the best marketer in the world can't sell that, right? The best salesperson in the world cannot sell that.
No.
But if it's, we were $349 and now we're $449, that's a much easier sell, right? That's a much easier message to get across to customers.
I have a warm, fuzzy story. This is friends of mine. This is not client relationship. It's friends of mine that are in the Texas market. He was retelling a story of how a staff member of his literally a doorman, a bellman, he gives him full credit for saving the company. He unabashedly says that this bellman saved his company. And this goes back in March, April, when we were first getting hit with the first serious waves of what happened. And it turned out a circumstance that the exec team was meeting or talking in an open space compared to being behind a closed door. And the houseman was doing his thing around the area, and was hearing the conversation about what do we do, how do we do this, what do we have to let people. I mean, they were blind. They were so as he says, panic driven as to the crisis of what was going on. You know, the cancellations that were happening at that moment and everything else. And turns out that this houseman was a former vet, and he was a former medical vet. You know, somebody that you know, and couldn't get a job in his field. It's a whole other story on that aspect. You know, but was working as a houseman because that's what he could do. And he interrupted them. He says, "Not my place, not my monkeys, not my circus," kind of thing. But he went over and says, "You're not treating this as the crisis that it is. You need to pause and assess what's going on and make decisions based on what you know rather than what you're fearful of." He says, "That was the first thing we learned in Afghanistan, where I did tour. That's the thing that we did whenever people were pulled into our tent, was what are we really looking at?" And not that he gave them advice on what to do after that point, but just that pause, reset conversation literally made them go, okay, so what do we, and they approached it from that, okay, calm. We got past the emotional, and he says, I literally give the guy credit. I give him Employee of the Year. You know, I've asked him to join our meetings.
So there is
I love that story so much because, and
Yeah.
I say it all the time, bring team members in when you're making decisions because you wouldn't believe what insight that they have to things. And you think you know everything that's going on, but they're really in the lobby every day dealing with things. They know much more than you do, or at least they can complement what your thinking is and set you straight. I love that story also because it shows you that veterans have an unbelievable amount of wisdom and experience that they can bring to any business. It's a great story.
It is an awesome story. It is also there's a framework. So what he just described is a framework known as the OODA Loop, which is observe, orient, decide, act. Lauren, you undoubtedly, I just put it in the
I saw that. Thank you.
The comments. It's a framework that I use from time to time. Actually, almost everything we do is built around a variation of this framework. But you've undoubtedly run into this, Adele. You've probably run into this. You know, how many times have you talked to a hotel, you've talked to a client or somebody, and you said, "What's your problem?" And they say, "We need more people, or we need more marketing budget, or we need X." And you have to tell them, that's not a problem, that's a solution. What's your problem, right? And the first part of this is observing what is the actual problem, right? You making sure you understand what is it we're trying to accomplish, what is it that we really need to do before you decide how to fix it. You know, there's an old engineering phrase of a problem well defined is half solved. And the OODA loop, which again, I think it came from, I'm pretty sure it came from, actually, I'm looking at the Wikipedia page, it came from the Air Force specifically. Yeah. And it's this military idea, and it's a really good way to approach things because the first thing you want to do is simply observe, you know, take a good look at what is actually going on. And Adele, you're right. The people in the front of house, the people in the back of house, the people who are interacting with guests every day are going to have a much better picture of what's going on. Then orient yourself, get your bearings, understand where you fit in that, and then you decide what you're going to do. And then you act, right? And it's a loop, it's a feedback process. So it is a great story, Lauren.
No, it just came to me this past week when he was sharing stuff, because we're going through, they're currently in the circumstance that I find some of my clients into is, Lauren, there's no disrespect to this, but we're in logistics hell right now. We're just in the daily.
Oh, sure.
And
I'm still hearing that too.
Yeah, and so that's actually what came out of the inspiration of what I wanted to say. Just to throw out topic of today is, as we go through this wave, we've been throwing around tsunami, whatever, demand to market. is there a second wave to this? Because what we're seeing and what I'm hearing, and I might personally, I never try to sell to myself, but I see how I try to buy things. I'm not intentionally traveling right now, even though I have a love to think that I want to, just so because the stories that I'm hearing and the costs that I'm seeing and the clamor to the people, one of the reasons why I think MetaSearch is doing so strongly as a channel right now is because people are just looking for, we better buy it or it's not going to be there. It's not a matter of rate, like, okay, that's a good rate or not a good rate. It's, if I don't buy it, somebody else is going to, because I'm not the only one thinking like this. And if you ever have the doubt that you're creative minded, just be in a crisis like a hurricane or something and think that you are doing something that nobody else is doing, and you'll find out that you are one of many people doing the same thing. Oh, look, we'll take this road. Nobody's been down this road before to get out of town. And it's like, where's all this traffic from? So you find out that you're not as unique as you think you are. But being said to that, I think that for those who can or have the tolerance of being able to wait a little bit longer, thinking that things will settle to a more common level, because I think also our culture for the first time is faced with a limited supply of something, or a limited supply of things. We've always been in the culture of there's always enough whenever I want it.
Sure.
And now we're faced with the fact that no, there's times where there's just nothing on the shelf and there's no rooms available and what have you. And I gave some examples from past times about that. But the idea of this is now into this frenzy. I mean, we see it in the housing market. We're seeing news stories now, people buying homes that are waiving inspections and then finding out they have raccoons in the thing or whatever.
Raccoons, by the way, would be a step up from what some of these non-inspected houses are finding. Yeah.
Good point on that. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. So, we're in that market. And I'm just wondering, there might be do you think there could be a second wave? I mean, I know there's always the unpredictability. I just saw a news pop up that, some hospitals in certain markets, again, are giving code blacks, that they're getting such a surge of cases now, again, that they're creating the self-isolation program internally, and they're doing who the hell is that?
Hello.
I'm sorry, sir. This is a private conversation.
Hello.
Oh my God, this is like Christmas twice. Tim, Ed, Adele, look, we did something good in our future life. Oh goodness. But anyway, I think first off, kudos to you. You called it even a year ago plus, actually over a year ago, that whatever happens, future tense will be a regionally affected methodology. To your point you made a long time ago, Tim, you said that, we probably never go under a full national lockdown and barring any sort of epic tragedy, but that it would be a regional impact in the future tense, that there would be this regional flux that would go on. And it's already beginning to show signs of like that. There are already places that are beginning to identify as, maybe if you have a choice not to go here, go there instead, kind of thing. Yeah. But anyway,
I appreciate the kudos on that. I want to be very clear. I like talking about frameworks a lot because it's a lot of what I do, right? But my framework on things like that, I didn't predict that. I simply was willing to bet that was the most likely scenario. Not that I knew that was for sure the thing. There's a great book called Thinking in Bets that I recommend to people all the time, written by a professional poker player. And it basically is a great way to think about things. Game out a couple of different scenarios and say, how much would you be willing to bet on scenario A versus scenario B versus scenario C versus scenario D? So I didn't predict anything. I simply was mostly more willing to bet that was the likeliest outcome than anything else, right? And that was based on, that's how it tends to work every other time this happens.
It's not just that.
With any kind of downturn, right?
It's how our federal government is structured.
Correct.
So it would take a change of the structure of the federal government in order to do anything beyond regional.
Right. Right. That's right. That's absolutely right. And also the way our industry tends to work. I mean, historically, if you ignore the pandemic, which I can't believe I'm saying that right now, and if you ignore 2009, every downturn in the history of this industry has been regional, right? How many times have you been in a scenario where, you go to a trade show, you go to a conference, and you're talking to people from Boston and they're talking about how things are awful. And you talk to people in New York and they talk about how it's amazing. And you talk to people in Vegas and they say it's amazing. And you talk to people in Houston and they say it's awful. That is the norm always. So when in doubt, assume you're average. When in doubt, assume it's going to go back to the norm. So, it wasn't, and I wasn't 100% sure on that by any stretch, but I was.
But he was willing to bet.
But I was willing to bet. If I was going to bet somewhere, that's the thing I would have bet on most.
And what's the name of the book again? I'm going to write it down in the notes.
Adele
Thinking in Bets.
Thinking in Bets. Okay. Oh, that's what. Okay. Yeah. Got it. Okay.
Yeah. One last thing on that topic, really quick, and then I'll shut up and ask somebody else a question. But the thing that I thought was smart about the book specifically is, the woman who wrote it said that business people often like to talk about business as a chess game, and she said chess is a terrible metaphor for business. Because chess, you can see all the pieces. You can see the whole board. You're operating with the same information that your competition is. Everybody knows everything that's going on in the game all of the time. And that's not remotely what business is like. Poker is a much better game as a metaphor because you can only see the cards you have. You don't know the next card that's going to be dealt. You can't see the cards your opponent has. You might be able to infer certain things by their actions, but you're making decisions with imperfect information. And you have to decide, how much am I willing to bet on this? And it's just a really, again, useful framework for thinking about this as we look at. So I'm going to turn this back into your statement a moment ago, Lauren, or the conversation you teed up. As we think about where we're going to be 3 months from now, where we're going to be 6 months from now, I wouldn't be predicting we're going to be anywhere. I would be saying, what's the likelihood we're going to be in this scenario? What's the likelihood we're going to be in this scenario? What's the likelihood we're going to be in this scenario? And how much am I willing to bet on those different scenarios being true? And that should be able to guide you into, where am I putting my chips? Where am I putting my resources? Where am I putting my efforts to get us to the right place? And so the question I would have is, if we look 3 months out, if we look 6 months out, what are the scenarios that we think are more likely than not what's gonna happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I want to poke a hole in the poker thing.
Please.
Poke a hole in the
Because I personally
even a
can't
sentence.
stand playing poker. And I realize the reason I can't stand playing it is you don't play every hand.
Right.
And you tend to only play hands you're forced to play. And that's not business.
No, of course. Well, that's where analogies break down.
And this is why I always like blackjack, because blackjack, you play every hand, but then blackjack's an imperfect as well because you're not playing against someone with others. I guess you could do blackjack.
You could use blackjack.
The house would be your competitor, but then you're always losing.
Or the people at the table.
No, because with the people at the table, you win or lose together, or you can win or lose independently. But unless you make a mistake, you're really not having much outcome on the others at the table.
Ed is illustrating right now, by the way, why I don't gamble very much.
but actually, I like your blackjack analogy a little bit better. And you are playing against house because the house does have always the odds of, when you look at the aspect of everything you don't know, the house doesn't know it as well, but they have the odds of success because you're playing against the fact that they will always be the upper hand.
So never get into a business where you're playing against a 6-deck auto shuffling shoe.
unless you have Norman who can count matches when he hits the ground.
Because then they throw you out of the building.
Well, but even then it's impossible with a 6-deck auto shuffling shoe because as they pick up the cards and they put them back into the shoe, it automatically shuffles back into the deck.
Oh, does it take the old cards? I didn't even know that.
Than we do.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I just thought there was a diminishing deck and it just auto shuffled what was still left. But it's like, okay.
So Ed, if you were gonna gamble on where we're gonna be, 3 months down the road, 6 months down the road, if you were gonna talk to hotels, as I'm sure you do, about where they ought to be thinking about for 3-6 months down the road, what are you thinking? What kinds of things are you looking at?
Smurf market. Because it's already showing signs of recovering far faster than anyone anticipated. Plus, if you get it wrong with the Smurf market, there tend to be only 10 to 15 room blocks, so it's not going to be financially ruinous to your profitability if you miss a demand pattern. Canada, marketing into Canada. Canadians generally travel January to March. They're just starting to get to a point of opening where they can travel to the US. That's coming. It's going to be sometime in the coming weeks to month or two.
September is the happy spot right now that everybody seems to be in consensus of.
And so Canadian travelers, I think, are going to do what US travelers did, and they're going to buck their seasonal behavior and travel as quickly as possible. So obviously, markets who are popular with Canadian travelers are going to benefit the greatest with this. But I think there is a massive opportunity for markets that don't generally see Canadian travelers to get out in front of that now and be prospecting into the minds of Canadian travelers to carry fourth quarter.
Mm-hmm. I'll add to it some things too. I think there's going to be a larger emphasis on length of stay opportunities. I think people are going to extend their normal travel opportunity, especially for holiday periods. And I think that they're going to look for a broader opportunity to expand what they do when they go for the purposes of holidays and so forth. If they go to Thanksgiving for family, they're going to spend longer time to spend more time. They're also going to change how they get together, and they're also going to decide if there's more things to do while they have the opportunity to be traveling, I think, especially given the current expenses associated with travel. I think they're going to try to optimize their spend.
Well, this is also why I think Canadian is interesting, because a large amount of the Canadian travelers prefer to drive over flying and will drive quite a distance.
Oh, yeah. Driving from Canada to Florida is the rite of ritual for them. That is not a...
Yep.
The fly means you have to carry less stuff. And when the Canadians come down, they have very long length of stay.
So this is, and I've actually been giving this advice to people, is if you're concerned that, school returning is going to put a dent in your travel, you should be prospecting into Smurf and into Canadian travel.
And when they drive down, it's really worth it for them to have their own car, especially if they're staying a long stay, which is what the Canadians do in Florida.
Yep. But they also do, they do through the whole East Coast. Actually,
through the whole East Coast.
I've been talking about this, quite a bit in the morning clubhouse rooms. And what I'm hearing is like, I know Canadian travel is what keeps Myrtle Beach alive January, February, March. And what's amazing is it's the longest length of stays. Like, I actually thought our system was broken in its tracking, because we were seeing, 130-day reservations. And I'm like, there's something wrong here. There's an extra number here or something. But it's true. But then, as I've been mentioning that, and I've always known Florida, right? Florida is kind of like where they all go. But I've been mentioning it in the clubhouse rooms, and I've been hearing pretty much all the destinations down the Eastern Seaboard have some level of Canadian demand during that time frame. So, and then I actually had a couple of Californians who happened to be visiting the East Coast and joined the clubhouse room in the morning, who also said in California they see a lot of drive market from Canada as well. So, what that says is, if you're not a market where Canada has been on your radar and you have a fear that you're going to have a drop in your demand, I would be investing now in getting into the hearts and minds of the Canadian traveler that's within a 3-day drive from you. It like, really, that seems to be the distances that they're willing to go, is about a 3-day drive.
Mm-hmm.
I completely agree, by the way, on Smurf. Completely and utterly agree. I've been talking about backyard and bundle pretty much since we started. Look for drive market, look for ancillary revenues. There is this idea of the second wallet, right? Of people spending money when they come into market that they allocated separately, both really and mentally, from what they spent on the trip. So try to get as much a share of the second wallet as you can.
Yeah.
And then the last one, and this is very tactical. I hadn't thought of Canada, honestly. That's a great point. What I have been encouraging folks to do, and this is very, very tactical, but use your analytics tool, whether you're using Google Analytics or something else. Go into Google Analytics and look at organic traffic. I don't mean organic search. I mean non-paid traffic, and the geolocation of where that traffic is coming from, and then spend into those markets, geo-target media into those markets. We are finding, for most people I'm working with, they're still getting a lot of drive market, but you're seeing a few pockets of people are flying from California, people are flying from Texas, wherever. So look to see where those markets are for you, and then allocate spend into those markets so you get a better share there. Be really tight in terms of how you geo-target your marketing still, but let the data of where you're seeing people already showing up on your site guide you to where you want to actually, double down. So, but Smurf, absolutely agree. Second wallet for sure, and then target like a son of a gun geographically.
Small, semi-sharp knife of something we've done, which proved to be really great, but it's still a blunt instrument in some ways, is because we had some contrast and lift compared to what had been existing in COVID versus what seems to be growing now. We almost created a self-made benchmark of nada and sama. And so what we did was, exactly to your point, Tim, for people we had around an airport up in Midwest, we were all drive market driven. We were monitoring and testing out our ad campaigns for other destination stuff because there were airport hotels and so forth, just to see if there was some feeder market. But we were keeping an eye via the APIs on flight lift.
For sure.
And as we were watching, we started seeing the lift schedules go in from other hubs. Now, this is that's the sharp side of it. The dull side was feeder hubs aren't markets, they're hubs. So it's not like the market itself isn't where you're getting the business, but through it, because the search was connected to where they're at, to where they need to get through, at least it was blunt enough that by targeting that market marketing-wise, we were able to capture some of that traffic influence from it as they were planning their trip eventually to come to the market that we were most interested in coming to. And it proved to be beneficial. Again, there was a sharp aspect of, let's follow the flights, but the blunt was, but it kind of like blind pig finds a turnip. It's like, okay, but they came through the feeder hub. And so now we're trying to determine from the guest engagement, the refinement of the feeder markets to the hubs that we were initially targeting to see if we could put a sharper point to the pencil on it. But it was just kind of those, and we did pretty good in comparison. And again, blend instrument side, we were only affecting what we already had as demand cycle weekends. So it wasn't as if we expanded anything or improved anything, but we were able to optimize at least the business traffic that was coming into market a little bit ahead of our comp set.
You can track. I mean, this is imperfect, right? Because I'm a big believer in leading indicators, not trailing indicators. And this is a trailing indicator. This is a pure trailing indicator. But, run a report once a week, once every 2 weeks on what were the feeder markets that the people who stayed with you came from. So that can be a way to get to the other side of those hubs. Lauren, it's not perfect. It is a trailing.
No, it's a great suggestion.
It's a trailing indicator, so it's not like guaranteed that just because you got a bunch of stuff from California last month doesn't mean that there's demand.
But you can do implied metric to it that if they had a
but you can do some implied metrics.
Say there might be another cause after. Yes.
You got it.
No, it's
so
great.
That would be how I would look at that. It's not perfect, but it's what's the old joke, the old line? All models are wrong. Some are useful. Right? Like this is.
That's a good mantra.
I have
actually.
A question. I'm constantly hearing people talk about the travelers changing expectations as a way of explaining the incredible number of complaints. And, there's got to be truth to something with all these fights, road rage, airport fights, hotel lobby fights, so many different things. But is it really that their expectations have changed so much, or is what we're delivering still changed because of COVID, even though it doesn't need to be anymore? They're just expecting things to be the way it was, and we haven't gone back to it.
I can only speak for the markets and the properties I deal with. And I have to say, generally speaking, we haven't seen much of it. So I don't know that I have a lot of information on that. I see the news stories. I hear the stories everywhere, as you do. But in the properties that I'm working with, we haven't really seen a lot of that.
If they're smart enough to be talking to you, they're smart enough to be.
Well, I mean, that's very kind of you. I think it's the other way around. I think they are very good operators to start with, And so, they're very good at accommodating guests. But I'm not hearing that we're running into a lot of problems with that personally. Now that may be an outlier. I want to be really fair, but I personally don't have any experience with that. Lauren, do you have?
That is good.
No, I mean we same story, same news, same things. It's kind of a mix because the clients that I have are those that thrived through COVID. So they never lowered their service profiles. They never lowered their capabilities beyond, and they never went past their ability to do what they did. And then the other clients that I have, and I'm not being derogatory in any way, but they are providing service. Their functionality is their foremost push, and it's not a destination resort relationship. It's not a leisure pure enjoyment. It was a functionality of the fact that they're providing accommodations and location, and it was to that end. That being said, I think they struggle based on their labor. I'm sorry, I'm a little biased. I have one company I work with that I've got totally impressed with, and I'm trying to help them as a management company to go into the market and say, guys, you are really good at what you're doing. You really are terrible at selling yourself, because these guys, when it came time, because they made it that their hotels that they operate are within driving distance of their corporate office, these guys were pulling front desk shifts. They put their money where their mouth was. When they said that they were supporting the properties, they pulled front desk shifts. They cleaned beds. They did whatever they could do to support those hotels. And I know of a lot of companies that are like, well, Bob, it's 5 o'clock. Let's go home. I hope those guys can figure out those arrivals. The fact that they are that committed to the relationship that they have with their hotels, I'm like, guys, that should be plastered over your wall, okay, and sent out to people that you are those kind of people. So they didn't have what you're talking about, Adele, in the sense that they never let the hotels go below that line of we don't care, or we're burnt out, we don't have, they still are struggling with getting people and qualified people, which I'd love to talk about methodologies today, because the job market search programs out there right now is a whole different beast out there right now as to how people find places and so forth. I'd love to talk about it in some way, but they're struggling through all of that. But they're kind of an anonymous entity because they're another man. Look at a list of management companies. Sure, they're somewhere in there. It's not.
Well, but and I don't mean to cut you off, but that is historically. I've been in the industry for 22 years, and with no disrespect to management companies, historically that's not what they did. They don't know how to sell themselves. That's not their role in the ecosystem at all. Right? So yeah, they do tend to be bad at it because that's not what they do. They rely on the brand, or they rely on, they hire a marketing agency or things along those lines if they're an owner operator, but they manage the property. That's their role.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be interesting to watch. I don't know that we're going to see a fundamental shift. This is one of my small bets, but if you look at, some of the people out there and some of the things they're doing, we may see some disruption of the way the ecosystem works, where some of the management companies may get more into becoming a brand and things along those lines, where some of the brands may, decide that some of the management things aren't necessarily where they're doing well, and they want to just focus on where they can. I'm not committed to that by any stretch. That's not a bold prediction that this will happen. I would be surprised if 5 years from now we look at the universe of existing management companies, we look at the existing universe of brands and the like, and they all look exactly the same, not just by name, but also by the services that they're providing to the industry and to guests more broadly. I wouldn't bet big money on it, but I would be surprised if we didn't see some shakeup in there a little bit.
I agree. I think that, and I think also emerging from all of this right now, everybody's making hay. So it's not really, as but the saying goes, with revenue, all problems are forgiven.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, but I think that a lot of hotel owners will have a hard look at what happened through COVID as during the time frame of downtimes, and then how it was handled as it was emerging, and then how it was handled post afterwards. Right. And I think the real test of metal will be when whenever this is, back to the competitive market of yesteryear, where we have to evaluate ourselves in comparison to our peers and to performances, where we are back to competing with other destinations. We're back to competing with people in our comp set, and not just taking business because there's so much business to take. In that sense, I think at that point there might be a hard evaluation of ownership going. So, are we with the best trainer of our horse?
Correct. Right. Yeah, I think that's exactly right, Lauren.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if everybody's making hay.
Definitely not.
I'm not thinking
definitely
everybody's
not.
making hay. No, I never. No, not on that. No, there's still lots of gap points, but there's a lot of places that are doing exceptionally well. I have a bit of a bias because Florida in general is just, you can call your price anytime you want. And
well, you say that, except not Orlando.
Not Orlando, right? It depends. So there was actually good data about this the other day, and I'm looking for it right now, and I will post it in the.
Well, you were looking for it. We'll talk about what's interesting from a dynamic there, which is Orlando has started to pick up and improve, and a lot of that is coming from people being priced out of the beaches.
Right.
So
right.
Orlando is actually a better deal.
Is an overflow destination.
Yeah, it's benefiting from the secondary, what's normally a secondary market this time of year, being full, and Orlando is the one that's getting the overflow. But it's still, I mean, and a lot of the urban destinations, it's a similar thing. I will say, I've seen consistently, it appears like everyone is making their weekends. Even in these urban markets,
right.
A lot of the feedback I'm getting is, hey, yeah, we're great on the weekends, but the floor completely falls out for weekday.
Yeah, and go ahead. No, all I was going to say was I can't find the exact data right at the moment, but what I recall, don't quote me on this precisely, but basically depends on markets. The big city centers that we're usually accustomed as being, huge, New York, LA, et cetera, still struggling. And especially properties above 300 rooms. You get into the bigger properties, that's where people are having lots of problems. So not everybody's making hay by any stretch. It's just that where people are making money, they're making stupid amounts of money right now. Where they're not making money, they're still not making money.
There are multiple destinations that the lodging community has made more revenue than all of 2019. Already this year.
I said that at the start of the show, Ed. One of my clients, one of their properties is doing well above 2019 already for the year. 2019, not year to date, full year
2019 already accomplished in the 6 months of this year, which is really interesting. And it's happening in a lot of these nature destinations. Where most of the customers I deal with in the nature destinations are on some form of either they've already broken the record of the best year they've ever had in their history of being in business, or are close.
Right.
And and that's an interesting dynamic too, because the thing I tend to throw back to them is, great, are you going to start pulling back a little to try and limit the damage on your reputation that you've done with these incredible price points and being understaffed? Are you going to start repairing that? And the answer, all but one. I actually had one in our clubhouse room. It was a hotel that decided through this whole thing they were going to keep their pricing where their pricing is, because they did not believe their value proposition deserved to be above that, and they valued their relationship with their travelers far more than trying to scoop up an extra $100, $200 a night per room. And this was not a high-end hotel either. But they knew what they were. They knew what their value proposition was. They did not feel good chasing the market. They felt like the better game to play was, being what they are to their travelers and fulfilling that promise. Because that's the problem now, is a lot of hotels are way over their skis on being able to fulfill the promise.
Love that statement.
They may not be saying words to promise a better experience, but they are saying it in their price point.
That's exactly right.
And we're fortunate that most days in our morning clubhouse, we have Amir from Longwoods in there, and he's an amazing source of consumer sentiment. And something very concerning about a month ago popped up in their consumer sentiment research, which is the traveler's expectation of the experience they'll have while they're on property versus how it was before. And it was something like 41% expected the same level of service that they would have gotten pre-pandemic. 30-something% were expecting better service than pre-pandemic. That is a huge problem. And what's driving the majority of that expectation is price.
Right.
Interesting.
Oh, so true though. So true. Well, I saw one the other day. I was doing some shopping for competitive research for a client of mine, and there's property in the market who 5-star property and 4+ star property, but literally was priced $179 some days of the week and $599 other days of the week. And I don't know how you can do that with a straight face. Like,
oh, I've seen worse, Tim.
Oh, I've seen worse in my life.
New York.
I've seen worse in my life, but not.
No, I'm talking right now. I have a client of mine in Montana.
Such a bad idea.
That every day of the week except for Saturday, they are like $200 a night. Saturday night, $3,300.
That's absurd.
And they're selling out on Saturday nights,
but
and that is
then raise every other night of the week to 3,000. They won't sell out, but they'll make more profit.
Yeah,
I mean, and you'll tell a better story. Sorry, I'm going to get super academic for a second, but there's this concept. We all know the yield curve. We all know the demand curve and things like that. Anytime you talk about a price above a certain amount, you get into the category of what's called a Veblen good, which is a Veblen good is a luxury product where the yield curve works precisely the opposite of what you would predict. The price tells a story about what the experience is going to be. And if you price it too low, you've told the customer that it sucks and nobody buys it. Right? So one of the first things I tell clients that I work with who are in the 4-star or 5-star product scale almost always is try pushing rates higher. Take all your rates and raise them. You may lose some occupancy, but you almost certainly make it up in RevPAR, and you almost certainly make it up in profitability. You want to test, you want to be smart about it, but saying that you're $200 and $3,300, that is a nonsensical sale.
Yep. But if you want a perfect example,
you can tell about a property.
If you want a perfect example of what you're talking about, and I know you know this area because you're moving here, but there's an area that's pseudo on Disney property called Bonnet Creek.
Oh, sure. Oh, I know Bonnet Creek really well, actually.
There are 2 luxury branded properties in Bonnet Creek, both of which have never been able to achieve the price point of their peer branded hotels and other destinations. It's the Wyndham Grand and the Waldorf.
Yeah.
The Waldorf Astoria on most nights is cheaper to book than 3-star off-property hotels. One of the reasons for that is the price gap from the lowest end Disney hotel to where the Waldorf has priced itself is substantial. And so anyone who's stayed in Disney before knows that the $400 a night Disney hotel is not a good hotel, and it's not a good experience. And then you see the Waldorf running at $199 on Disney property, you immediately assume that's a really poor hotel.
You're telling people that it's crap.
Yep.
So pricing is telling people that is not a good property.
JW Marriott and Four Seasons both put properties on Disney property as well. They went the opposite route. They're incredibly high priced. They get it. And you look at this, it's exactly what you're talking about. Is it's a mix of that concept plus anchoring, right? Like,
of course,
if you're on Disney's property, you're anchored to Disney's price points. And it's one thing to be $20 cheaper than the cheapest, but just understand you're going to be considered, you must be the art of animation level quality of hotel, which is a Holiday Inn.
Right.
Yeah. The art of animation, if you've ever stayed at one, it's a Holiday Inn with some graphics in the rooms. Where you're not being considered of the same level as the Grand Floridian, which has to be, I've never looked, but I have to imagine the Grand Floridian is the highest ADR hotel in Orlando.
Yeah, I stayed at the Grand Floridian God, 5 or 6 years ago for one night because it was the only room I could find in town.
And it's an expensive room.
And it was really expensive. Yeah, and it was good. It was
good.
Yeah,
I
it's a
think
good
It was
hotel.
good.
All of Disney's
I wouldn't have
hotels
chosen
are
it, but my
overpriced.
group, the family reunion,
Yep.
mom wanted it to be there,
Right.
and it was good.
Yeah, it's not great. None of Disney's hotels are great. I mean, just understand. And they're nowhere near worth what they get for them, but it's because of everything else that they get the price they get. But when you look at that concept, you look at the Waldorf Astoria at Bonnet Creek, which is a great hotel, beautifully built, great restaurant.
Oh, yeah.
And they struggle to get rate. The Wyndham Grand, 2 hotels down from it, is where I stay with my family if we're going to do multiple days at Disney, because you can get a king room with bunk beds for about $179 a night on peak season, which a Wyndham Grand
should not be anywhere near that price point.
No, and that you can tell they're anchoring themselves to the Waldorf.
Yeah.
And the Waldorf is not anchoring themselves correctly. But it is that concept of, for someone who doesn't know what a Waldorf Astoria is, which, let's face it, most people don't know what a Waldorf Astoria is.
Right.
They're just looking at the price point compared to the budget Disney hotels, and it's cheaper, but it's on Disney property still.
Right.
And so they're screwing themselves up. And actually, interestingly enough, I believe they're rebranding it away from Waldorf to a new Hilton brand.
Huh.
Interesting.
Which is not a luxury Hilton brand.
Right.
But it's that concept you talked about, is the way you price is going to tell some of the story, but understand that cuts both ways. If you way overprice,
for sure,
and you get it,
and you under deliver, you got a real problem.
Yeah, well, and here's the thing, hotels that normally get $200 to $300 a night, if you move up into the $800 to $1,000 a night stratosphere, no matter what you put in any of your communications, it will not stem the expectation that someone who's paying $800 a night for a hotel room is going to have.
That's right.
So true.
That's absolutely correct.
If I were them, instead of raising the rate so much for Saturday, I would put a long stay on it and raise the rate for that 4-night stay across the board. Maybe.
I agree.
I completely agree.
I agree, Adele. That's why it stuck out to me, and I actually called the hotel because I figured it was a mistake.
Right. On one side or the other, right?
Yeah. I figured something went awry with an automated pricing system, and it went over, and they said no. And then I was just out of curiosity, I'm like, are you selling rooms? And they're like, we're selling out every Saturday night. I'm like,
oh, they're selling out every Saturday night. They need they should never take a one night.
So many different levers to pull. Different levers to pull. And they're pulling the wrong lever. And we talked about this actually a lot this morning, is the long-term negative impact of this behavior is going to be felt by hotels for a long time. The damage and the burning of reputation that you're creating by pricing the way that you're pricing. I almost want to encourage hotels, listen, I get it. If you need the cash flow or something like that, then you know what you should do is package in a free night for a return stay as a value benefit to what they paid to come right now. Because at
3
least
for 2, 4 for 3, absolutely.
Yeah. So you're going to come stay with us, and it's insane right now. And we know that these prices are insane, but people are buying them. So to make up for it, you stayed 5 nights. We're going to give you 2 free nights to use anytime between this time and this time to come and stay with us.
Yep.
Yeah. And
to
I want
see
to
us at our best.
And I want to say something back to what you mentioned before about Smurf business and so forth. The exploitation of that market is also profound at this point as well. I have a dear friend of mine who's in with me that he's getting married this month, Tim. Not you, Tim, but my Tim. You've been doing this for a while, buddy.
Happily married.
But he's getting married this month.
The other family. Don't tell anybody.
It's me on the other family. Hey. So anyway, he was supposed to get married last year.
I thought it was awfully big of me. Anyway,
he was supposed to get married last year. They put it off to this year. Of course, the cancellation, there's still fees. The people still held them to fees of cancellation and rebooking and so forth. And part of that was also the condition of full payment upfront, no refund. Well, they went over and planned it for 300 people. Beautiful place. And they get the invites back and they have 50 because it's just too expensive for people to travel. The cost of getting there was extreme. So they went back to the venue to go over and say, we don't have the people. This is going to be a hollow hall. We're going to have 50 people. We're supposed to have room for. Yeah, too bad. Okay.
Oh, and I have an idea. Elephants.
Ooh, I like elephants. Hey, have you been watching the same shows I have? Have you seen the Indian wedding show? Oh my
With the
God.
elephants.
What Indian wedding show?
I don't know about this show.
Yeah, like bride and
It's
groom
amazing.
come
They spent
in
$500,000 on
these beautifully like dressed elephants.
Yeah.
And if you're going to have a huge hall and
Have
not a
elephants.
lot of people
I'm
there,
liking it. I don't know if they can grab one by now, but I'm sure they could be. Yeah. Okay.
But I think the hotel at least ought to throw in the shovels for free.
yeah.
So here's the other part with it. The hotel refuses to give them a block. Sorry. Rack rate, all you can get, there's no block. You have no block. So they're going through this whole process of it. So then, leap forward, client, beachfront Carolinas. Went over and can't sell their conference room because their rate requests are almost quadruple what they used to ask for. And they can't understand why they're not getting anybody to book for their conference center stuff for Smurf Business. Because it's like, guys, I understand that you feel that you can price yourself into a market of demand, but you have outpriced yourself. They're not getting people to buy stuff. And that's the part that I think is unfortunate is that, and I think Dean brought this up in a statement a couple of weeks ago on the show. He says it went from revenge travel to revenge of the traveler, we're taking revenge out on the traveler. Like, oh, you want to travel now, do you? Well, here's the price you have to pay. And so some people are actually replanning. There's friends of his that are also going to get married are literally, they canceled everything they're doing and they're considering just to do the elope thing and have a private party when it comes time best for them to do it. And then just enjoy the money they didn't spend on going someplace to do something, mentality. But
So I hate to keep bringing up, but I mean, we have so many good conversations in the clubhouse room with different points of view. This actually led us to one of who we think is going to be the midterm kind of losers of this behavior, which is going to be real estate investment trusts. Because a lot of this behavior is coming from REIT-owned properties, where they don't care about your scores, they don't care about anything. Like, oh, you achieved higher scores, yeah, but your cost of labor went up, so that's a loser. And there was actually a pretty deep talk about that because I was kind of naming who I thought was going to be the winner coming out of all of this, which is select service and micro resort hotels. So hotels that you're not planning to spend a huge amount of time at. They're not getting hammered on their service scores, even with getting up into higher prices, because the expectation of why stay at that hotel is to explore the area.
That's right.
Well, it's the area. You're exploring the area.
Right.
And if anything is limited in the area, they're not looking at the hotel as the one who caused that. So I was naming them as the winners, and someone who used to work for a very large REIT-owned property was like, yeah, and the losers are going to be the REIT-owned properties because they don't care. And so they're the ones that are like, how many pennies can we jack this up? And who cares what the recourse is? Like, low cost, high profit, that's what we want. It is interesting when you look at that dynamic. I really do believe these simpler properties that have a simpler promise to fulfill are the ones that are going to win the hearts and minds of a lot of travelers. And that's going to have a lasting effect for at least a couple of years.
I have a question, and this may be a naive thing to ask. I interpreted micro resorts differently. You referred to them as being the small, not destination resort, but the catalyst.
Less expectation of services, meaning you're, generally a micro resort's not going to have a spa.
Right.
They'll have a dining outlet. They'll have a reasonable pool, but not like an expectation of poolside service.
Of the zero edge and all that. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So it is a full service hotel, but it's not big, right? It's maybe 200 to 300 rooms total. And usually you're in locations where the thing to do is spend most of your time not in the hotel.
I sold.
That makes sense. Yeah,
I sold Super 8 Travelodge Howard Johnson for years, and we used to talk about the Super 8. And by the way, to this day, I will tell you, Super 8 is one of my favorite hotel brands that exists because they make a very simple promise and they deliver on it consistently. And one of the things we used to say constantly, and this isn't meant as a slur, it's going to sound like we're making fun of people. We're not. But nobody stays at nobody went to the Super 8 to stay at the Super 8. Right? Mm-hmm. They are going somewhere else. They are in town for some other purpose. There's other things they want to do. And what Super 8 does is a really good job of that. Yep. You're the place you stay when you're here to do other stuff. And I completely agree with that assessment, Ed. I think
But everybody deserves that they get a very clean room, a fresh smelling room, a friendly service, and well maintained.
Right. Super 8's tagline for a long time, which was a bad tagline. It's not a great tagline, but Super 8's tagline for half the time I worked at Wyndham was clean and friendly. And that's what they were, right? Yep. Super 8 was the Southwest Airlines of hotels. And I mean, I'm not trying to be delusional about this. There were 2,000 Super 8s, 2,200 Super 8s. Some percentage of them were not up to standard. Let's be fair, right? And if you're talking about 2,200 hotels and 10% aren't up to standard, that's bigger than most other chains, right? So there were a lot of hotels that were not great. It also meant there were 2,000 that were exactly what you needed them to be: clean, friendly, smelled okay when you walked in the room, right? Maybe not the most updated, fully understood. But again, you weren't staying there to hang out in the room. You were staying there
to your point, Adele, is
to Disney.
I think everyone has that expectation. And with these smaller hotels, that's the primary expectation. Correct. As soon as you start getting into destination hotels with other services like butler rooms or spas or golf or anything like that, those hotels, the expectation is not clean and friendly. That is just going to happen. The expectation is all of the other things that make this hotel expensive are why I'm here. And those all need to be perfect. And if they're not, I'm blaming the hotel. Even if it's not their restaurant, it's in their building. Even if it's not their spa, it's in their building. Even if it's not their golf course, it's in their building. I'm blaming them. Those are the ones that I think are having the hardest time, because let's face it, just staffing your core team is really difficult right now. Now imagine also having to deal with employee shortages on the golf course, employee shortages in the spa.
Your barista at the coffee shop, your pastry countertop person, all the other stuff you have.
So this is why I was saying, I really think the winners of this are these simpler properties. And I think it's going to have more than a U1 2021 type of effect. I think there's a lot of people who are picking trips that are less about staying at the hotel and are picking trips that are more about exploring. And I think they're being surprised by the experience they're having at these properties when they see the reviews of other properties in the area that were more expensive and more complex are getting hammered, where these properties are getting really good review response.
Yeah, I mean, think about Adele, and I'm gonna. This is the last thing I'm going to say, and then I'm going to have to drop, unfortunately. But think about all the times you see on TripAdvisor the 3-star product or the 2.5-star product that gets 4 bubbles on TripAdvisor, and it's not because it's or 5, and it's not because it's better than the 5-star property. It's because they do a really good job of delivering on what the value proposition is. There's no gap between the expectation and the delivery against that expectation, or if there is, it's a positive.
It's
gap,
a positive
not
gap, yeah.
not a negative gap.
Yeah.
Mhm.
We did research a long time ago, and this is well overdue for an update, but I've used it for years, where we referred to what people look for. The research backed this up. What guests look for, what I always call the P's and the Q's. They're looking for, in some relationship to one another, price, proximity, how close am I to the things that I care about when I'm in destination, qualities, which is really just a fancy way of saying amenities so that we can actually get an extra Q in there, and quality, right? And when you can add those up in whatever it means for this specific trip, that defines the value proposition for me of, did I get good value and will I give it a good review? The relationship between them may change. For this trip, I may be more price conscious and I care less about the amenities. I care less about how close I am to things. This trip, I desperately need to be by the main gate to Disney, and I'll pay any amount of money for it. But those are the things that define the value proposition for the guest. And I think Ed's exactly right. The properties that have an easier time delivering on that value proposition, and especially because proximity is such a big driver right now, and the qualities are less of a driver, I think they're just in a really good position. I do apologize. I do need to run, unfortunately.
No,
I've got to be somewhere in 20 minutes, and I need to stop talking if that's going to happen.
Actually, three things. One, it is a joy to see you again, flat out.
Likewise.
Two, I need to trace you down because personally I have questions that I need your stoic advice on, about like the TV channel and blah, blah, blah. Plus, I am totally still in need of geeking out with you on VR, just so you know.
Looking forward. I can't wait. I am working remotely. I am doing a workcation next week from sunny Orlando, Florida. So,
and he gets to have lunch with me next week.
What?
Yeah. So I'll be sitting in a hotel room some parts of the day.
What happened to my invitation to come down on the boat with a case of beer? Where did this go? Where did this go?
You're much further south than that, my friend.
It's only a couple of hours.
This is a very short trip.
Are you looking for a new home?
We are looking for a new home. We're doing some work and things along those lines. Yeah, but we're trying to figure out where we're going to live when we actually live there.
Don't live near Ed. The neighborhood has gone to hell.
Actually, to be fair, I don't want to out Ed, but I know where Ed lives roughly, and it is much further away. Proximity, it doesn't work for us specifically.
Right, because where Tammy's going to work, you can't get there from where I am.
Oh,
without traffic, it's 15 minutes. The problem
with traffic, it's a day and a half.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, Tim, thank you so much.
Right.
If people want to find your podcast and what you do, where can they find you?
timpeter.com/podcast. Look forward to it.
Safe travel.
I will not see you next week. Next week I will be on a plane, but I will see you hopefully the week after. All right.
Awesome. Safe travel.
All right. Cheers.
Have fun with lunch with Ed. Dude. So hey, since I do not make it up in the morning, Ed, as much ever, maybe once or twice when you were on vacay. What else has been coming up on your mind? Because our afternoons have truly shifted into almost small business land. I mean,
interesting.
It has been really. We've been getting a strong cultivation of I have this idea, or this is what I'm doing or this is what I'm building, and so it's turned into and a lot of restaurant stuff. I got to say, we've really for the past couple of weeks. It seems to come up more persistently. Food and beverage operations. There was a lot of people begin to come to the show. Well, I don't know what to call it, a show, a conversation. I don't know, a room. The room that is more about restaurant stuff, because we've been having the likes of Doug and Dave and people that are in the space,
right? And
the Restaurant Association is coming up August, isn't it? Orlando? Is it in Orlando?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's Orlando. So it's kind of building up to we had food truck conversations. So what's going on in the morning side?
So we've had some interesting conversations this week. So Wednesday, as you know, we do destination marketing, specific chat. So we actually talked about the promotion that Tennessee Tourism is running. And I don't know if either of you caught this.
No.
So they partnered with a famous country music singer, and I'll get the name completely wrong, but it's like a Kenny Chesney type person.
Okay.
Who evidently wrote a song like Tennessee on Me or something. So the campaign is Tennessee on Me, and it is a campaign targeted at their urban centers. So Nashville, Memphis, Chattanooga, and it's targeted at midweek stays for now till the rest of the year. That if you book a 2-night midweek stay, they will give you a $250 airline credit to any of 4 participating airlines.
Wow.
So super targeted, tied into pop culture that's meaningful to Tennessee as well. Country music's a big thing there. But also really thoughtful. And what's interesting is part of the discussion is there was initially some political attack on why are you feeding Nashville and Memphis and Chattanooga and not Gatlinburg and Pigeon Forge. This attack was not coming from the Gatlinburg and Pigeon Forge industry because they're overwhelmed. And they have been for almost a year.
Yeah, they've been crazy.
And so that was kind of interesting that there was an initial kind of political attack on it until everyone went, because Chattanooga or because Gatlinburg and Pigeon Forge and the likes of those can't take anyone else. Like there's no room left at those inns. But the urban markets, weekends are back. Like, Nashville's weekends are on fire, but they're still struggling on those midweek stays. And they don't believe corporate travel is going to return in a meaningful enough level to, trust that, the fall will pick up and stuff like that. So they're running this to try and get tourism, leisure tourism into these cities. So really smart targeting, and they're capping it at a really high number. They're going to do 10,000 of these airline credits.
Wow, that's a lot of money.
Nice.
Yep. They built an entire site for it. They put a booking engine on it that has all the inventory of all the hotels in those markets.
Oh,
like
this has been thought out.
Really well thought out, and you can tell it was thought out for a while because you can't pull that stuff off quick.
No.
So we talked about that on Wednesday. Then on Thursday, we talked about Wyndham's announcement that they're going to start having Bitcoin as an option for rewards on the Wyndham Rewards, which was really funny because the person who brought it up was really excited about it because he's really into cryptocurrency. And I said, yes, but you're not Wyndham's customer.
Yeah.
And this is nothing more than a talking point for shareholders to feel like Wyndham is super innovative. But in the reality, and I actually put a bet to him. So Tim talks about talking in bets. I put a bet to him that less than 300 people in the next 5 years will take a Bitcoin from their Wyndham rewards. So that then actually led to a really interesting conversation about the challenges of blockchain technology, and how we keep forgetting that the scale of consumer adoption, like you can't hit mainstream consumerism with the current way that blockchain works. There's not enough resources in the world to serve a distributed ledger for something that would hit like an iPhone level scale, because of just the amount of GPU resources it takes to serve up a distributed ledger is still the biggest problem. It's the biggest limiting factor. And it is starting to creep to where that's becoming obvious, because some forms of use of blockchain are actually starting to hit reasonable early adopter level usage, and it's already choking. I mean, like if you've tried to buy a computer at all in the past 2 years, if you wanted a good graphics card, their pricing is over the top, because the entire supply has been getting scooped up by server farms serving up distributed ledger.
Did you see in the news a power station up in the Northeast? And I can't remember whether it was. I don't think it was Connecticut, but it was something like that. It may have been Maine, even. I'm not too sure. So a power company shut down this power plant. It was a coal burning power plant, and because they didn't need it anymore, they created different infrastructure, but the building still existed. So a startup company, bought the power plant and built it as a Bitcoin farm.
Oh my God.
And because they needed the power to run all these, I mean, they have tens of thousands of small box processors to farm Bitcoin and other crypto. I'm saying Bitcoin in general, but all cryptocurrencies. that they were farming for this, and they were expanding. And the issue came in the news because as the coal firing place got picked up, they were turning it to more economical, whatever. But the discharge goes back into the lake again, which goes down the river again. Maybe in Michigan, I don't know. And so people locally are like, we don't need this. We don't need no crypto stuff, and it's going to pollute this and so forth. And they had this argument about the environmental impact on this. Why do we have a green currency but a non-green way of producing it? Blah blah blah. And the pictures they were showing on the inside, that was scary. I mean, it is just like a
it looks like a scene from a movie.
Rows infinitum of all these racks of computers, processors that are just all interconnected and so forth. I'm like, my God, the computing power that was just
and this is the problem, because also think about beyond the pollution of the power drain of that. Most GPUs contain rare earth metals.
Yeah.
And so rare earth metals are called rare earth metals because they're really hard to mine, and generally they're actually not rare. They're in ample supply, but they're in no concentration anywhere. So mining of rare earth metals is usually destructive to the ecosystem that it's being done in. So anything that contains rare earth metals has a huge problem on its footprint. And so if you look at like the amount of that being consumed by what is basically a useless technology, because it's useless. No one has figured out how to do this better. And again, it's because there's not a lot of money in figuring out how to do it better. So, yeah.
What do we need this for?
Exactly. And so when you see hotel brands like Wyndham talking about this,
it's just buzz.
It's buzz to a point where you also know that they didn't think this through.
Yeah, it's so okay. Question going back to the Tennessee conversation. So, has there been any discussion as to how the conference center in Nashville, which was such a change in the Nashville culture? I mean, from what it was before to what it is now, are they getting back to demand levels that the conference center can fulfill, or is it still kind of a, you know what, we're really relying on our Nashville Roots program where it's music and destination and kind of thing? Are they getting back to where they were? Because they changed the culture. That's the conference center.
Yeah, I mean they're still not there. That's still a long ways away. Yeah, no, and so we haven't really talked much about that. Mainly because I mean, much like Orlando Convention Center isn't doing anything.
Right. And I imagine Chicago's still struggling. All the large footprint. I mean, Chicago. Good gosh, I mean, McCormick Center. It's just. It's the size of it. If you ever get to see even a portion of McCormick not set up, it's amazing the size of it. And Orlando, I've seen Orlando once, their main venue where they had it all broken down and they were yet to construct.
Yeah, and it's just a big open space. Yeah, it's.
Oh my God, that's amazing. I mean, like you feel like you could fly a plane in there. I mean, it's so.
You could fly a helicopter in it.
I believe it. Yeah, I believe it. It's amazing the size of that. You think about all the things that it takes to run those places, and all that's kind of on a lower demand cycle right now. All right, another question. Okay.
So and then today we talked about a bit more of the marketing challenge that has come up with not just the issue of filling staff, but now the media has started picking up the greed of what's happening in hospitality, where. And it's been really targeted towards the major brands on how they're announcing that they're not going to bring back services. And a lot of the headlines of these have been they're cutting services, but not the price. And
that's where the anger is coming from, I think.
It is. Yeah. I mean, it's hugely problematic, and it's going to have a bit of a lasting effect. I think it's there's going to be a hangover phase at some point where travelers are just going to sideline themselves, either because they're priced out or the value proposition of what they get for what they are paying is not in line.
Well, go ahead, Adele. Go ahead.
I think that because a lot of times those hotels under a chain brand are owned by different people and managed by different people.
Real estate investment trusts.
What did you say?
Real estate investment trusts.
Yeah.
But the ones, I mean, it's like the DoubleTree Hotel in Reading, Pennsylvania is one of the highest rated hotels in the entire state with a pure 5 bubble review score of thousands of reviews, and the rest of DoubleTree, you know, at a 78% guest satisfaction, and I'm sure the NPS score is much lower than that. That's because individuals who run different hotels are either living by the Hilton stated culture and those who are not. And that is the difference. You
Well,
have
and
to live
guess who gets to get away with not living by that culture? The heavily investment owned properties,
Yeah.
because Hilton and Marriott can't really push back strong against them because they have so much of their portfolio.
Right. And they've performed so poorly for them. They don't have any legs to stand on. Hilton I mean, like, I think what you're pointing out is the Hilton announcement that other than their premium brand levels, they've automatically reduced their housekeeping standards of service levels. And I think from what we're seeing in the media coverage, again, to your point, is you're getting a lot of people going, let me get this right. I'm paying twice, 3 times as much, and you're automatically telling me before I walk in the door, I'm not going to get what I used to get for what I used to pay a third of.
Yep.
So, yeah.
And actually, you just touched on the key point. I'll wrap up here because I got to run.
Yep.
The biggest problem for these brands is people remember what they paid in 2019 because they do travel a lot with these brands, right? And so you're actually, the people who you're burning the hardest are the ones you worked and spent so much money on winning over to get them to always just default to you. Those are the ones you're hurting. And this is where I'm saying there's going to be a long tail effect. And I think it's going to get to a point where it'll be like a hangover, where there's nothing you can do. It's going to be sluggish. You're going to be, everything you try to do is going to be like you're trying to sprint in a pool of jello. And it's all because of what's going on right now, and it's avoidable, and it's not being avoided. So with that, I do have to run because I have a 1 o'clock. I did everything I could. I told you I would try to make it today. So
thank you, Mr. Ed.
It was really nice seeing you guys.
It was
I'm glad
great
you're
seeing
doing
you.
well. And I hope you guys have a good weekend, and I'll talk to you soon.
And say hi to Tim when you have lunch with him.
You got it. All right. See ya.
Bye, Mr. Ed. No, it's true to your point, Al, that there is this anger. I mean, and it is constantly in the news. That even just down here in Southwest Florida, in our local airport, we had a young woman, a 20-something-year-old woman, who just escalated her belligerence being on the plane, trying to board, where she refused to wear a mask, and then she started spitting on people or whatever. I don't know, just bad. Now she's in jail because of all of this. And then so they're interviewing people in the airport about the fact that even though over the speaker it's saying, you know, it's federal law that in the airport you're supposed to wear the mask, they're in people without masks. And the guy says, and then they have to bleep them out. Yeah, this is bull bleep. You know, I ain't wearing no mask, whatever. And so they asked the security people at the airport, what do you do about people not wearing masks? Well, we don't pick people out of the group, but if somebody complains about them, we send them to give them this little piece of paper to notice that they're supposed to wear a mask. Oh, that I'm sure works really well. You know, and so you're not enforcing it, but you're mandating it to a certain. And the guy even at the one says this, you know, whatever. He says, but I'm also going to wear a mask when, you know, he's carrying one little paper one. He says, but I'm also not going to make it so I can't get somewhere. So the point of wearing a mask is totally eluded these people. The function of having to wear a mask hasn't. Okay, I have to wear a mask to get on a plane. Fine. Do I believe it? No, I think it's a choice we have. Sure, it's a choice we have until you get sick and realize that it wasn't your choice, that somebody gave it to you. How do you feel about that? Are you mad at the person that made the choice not to do what they should have done, and then you end up getting sick because of it? You know, in our Sioux culture, the first thing you want to do is chase them down and go and say, hey, you gave it this to me because you're irresponsible, like a car accident. Another local news thing. Somebody died from somebody running a red light, and they got charged with running a red light only. And people are like, how is this possible? You ended somebody's life for breaking the law, and the only law you broke that you're being held culpable is running a red light. And they're sitting there going, how does that balance in the universe of you did something worse than just breaking a traffic law? You caused fatal injury, and there's not a law that does anything about that. So we have this quid pro quo conversation back and forth of what you get versus what you deserve and so on. But we're not enforcing it to the level that we're all looking at saying, and some people are sitting back saying, oh, okay, well, hey, shame on them. 99.8% of the people that are getting COVID right now don't take a vaccine. Well, you get what you take. You're missing the point of what pandemics are like. It's that variant will turn into another variant that eventually all of us that did take the vaccine don't have a vaccine that counters what now is in the population. That's the problem, is that the more it's allowed to continue to change, the more likely it'll eventually come out that what we did for ourselves does affect us because it doesn't effectively cover it. And just, I think all what you're saying earlier on is penned up in what we're doing when we travel right now, where we're like, okay, I'm going to go travel. You're mad that you have to pay as much as you're doing. You're getting less for doing it. And then the silliest of things will just absolutely light your candle as to how frustrated you are with, and the staff gets a full face. They're the ones that get it.
The staff has had it up to here with the people who they're viewing those people as being, over entitled, argumentative. They're not reading the confirmation. They booked this type of room and they're complaining that they booked a different type of room, or that's not what they expected. And these guests must be idiots. And all of this, they're so frustrated, and I feel their pain. And we're not addressing our communications. We're not doing anything to help them have a reasonable expectation so that there isn't this attack at the front desk. It's not fair to the front desk people, and we're not properly equipping the front desk people on how to solve the problems in the first place. But the worst thing is, and with what you're saying about the accidents, they're not accidents. If you're intentionally, repeatedly doing highly risky behavior that is not necessary, you can make another choice. You can be more practical. Sometimes there are accidents that happen. A bee stung you while you were driving and you lost control of the vehicle and something happened. That's an accident. But if you ran a red light and you continually do so because you're not paying attention, you're a distracted driver, you're constantly texting. How many times do you have to be told to stop texting? You change the radio station. You're talking to your kids in the back seat, looking behind you. That is, you're driving with one hand. Everybody knows that these are dangerous things to do, and not a way to be a responsible driver. And if you take somebody's life, that you can't really call it an accident.
Right. At that point, it's funny that we talk about. This goes to conversations we've had and many times, I know, not in the show, but also just in general for clubhouse rooms and so forth, is that I'm struggling with trying to help companies.
Bless you.
Popped up out of the blue. Apologies. Finding team members, and the traditional ways of looking for it are moot, in the sense that they're not applicable anymore. And team members that are being stretched beyond their limits. It's one thing to be elastic and do that from occasion and come back to it and do it occasion. The new benchmarks are, it's a constant beyond the normal spectrum of expectations. And those people, as good as they're intended and as well as they are, they're not given the resources to do what they can, and or have no, even if given the total carte blanche to do what they do, they just can't keep doing enough of it. The old adage is, you can be the best warrior in the world, but you can be overtaken by 100 dumb people that don't know how to fight, simply because you can be overwhelmed by the sheer volume of what you're having to deal with. And that's what a lot of our team members are, that are great, and they are multiple tasking and multiple capable and fully good people that are trying to do the right thing. But after a while of doing this so much, so often, for so long, their attitudes can get lost, their motivations can get lost, and they're resigned to, I can't solve it anymore. I've been crushed. Their spirit has been crushed. And they get into that indifference. That's the only defense they can fall back to, is the defense of, I can't care anymore. We talk about these things from wartime. the Vietnam veterans talked about the fact that they remember their first squad that they went into battle with, but they don't remember many of the squads afterwards, because for some, they didn't want to get involved in knowing the people they were with as much, because if they lived long enough, they would. If they didn't, then it is one less pain. And so we're kind of dealing with that in a different way, obviously by far, with our industry when it comes to the indifference that we're creating in our good team members, where the only defense they have is to not care
Yeah.
because they can't
And
suffer that
sorry.
pain. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say exactly. And that's why you can't expect that somebody who has numbed their soul, because it's so soul crushing, to be in a place where the leadership are not listening and not making changes to accommodate them. And you expect those people to go out in the world and recommend this career to their friends.
Yeah.
How is that going to happen?
Right.
You know, they're questioning their life choices already. They're not going to drag people they care about into it. They're
No.
not going to meet somebody at Target or UPS or at the gas station that has a sparkling personality and say, I know a great opportunity for you. How can they do that?
They might
when-
reverse the conversation and say, hey, you got another spot I can work with you.
You're
I mean,
right.
honestly, we're driving people away from that.
Yeah, the only way to be an attractive spot for talent of any kind, the only way to get your team to be excited about inviting people that they like into this framework is to be the kind of hotel who's in a state of continuous improvement, who's looking how to achieve their goals and celebrate improvements and greatness every day, and where they feel themselves appreciated, cared for, and respected as a human being. And if we just treat them, if the ownership is so far away from what's happening on property that they don't care, what they think they're making decisions that are in the best interest of the revenue. But the fact is that well-trained, aligned teams that are empowered to make things better every day are making 3 times more revenue than their counterparts, and they are delivering 1.5 times to their shareholders. And that is according to McKinsey and Company.
Mm-hmm. It's true, and I guess in a strange way, it's going back to an old adage of Maslow's hierarchy, that it's wonderful to be aspiration in your terminology of we want to do these things and this is our goals and so forth. But the reality of your life is you base it on what you are able to say is at the level of what you can do. And sometimes sustainability or existence and tolerance is all you can do, because all the other things that you would like to do, like you're saying, being treated as a human being, thoughtful as to the goals that are created for the company and so forth, isn't being supported by the people that have the strongest influence on it. And this goes to a little bit of what I was pointing to about the pursuit of other team members. A lot of people don't, from an HR perspective, get included in the discovery of more talent that can help them. A lot of people are doing the frontline work. They could have a strong influence. We pointed out in the earliest part of our conversation today that they should be solicited and engaged in what it is that is best that they need. As Tim pointed out, it's not talking about the solution. It's talking about the actual problem. What is the actual problem? The problem is I can't do this because I'm doing this at the same time. The problem is I can't be here and over there at the same time. So what is the solution requirement for that? So after you have identified the problem, as he pointed out, just talking about I can't do everything you want. Well, that's apparently the solution that we would like to think you could do, but we can't. We have to find the problem. And so they're not being solicited to help with that. And then secondly, the people that are responsible for it aren't given the direction from the people that need to classify what that is. Like an HR person doesn't know all the things that a front desk person truly needs to imbibe in for the role that they specifically need. A nighttime night clerk is different than a daytime desk clerk, even a morning clerk, because you have a different propagation of conversation, you have a different purpose, you have a different process of work. You have arrivals versus departures. You have continuance rather than transition. There's lots of demands. A night auditor, the criteria for a night auditor is radically different than everybody else. They have to be able to be awake at a time when most people are asleep. They have to be able to do functional work repetitively, similarly, day in and day out, that would normally drive other people like, I need something different. No, night audit is very much not different. Night audit is progressive and process-based, but by the same token, they have to be prepared for variations because some crazy stuff happens during night audit. Things that don't happen during the day happen during night audit. And all of those nuances aren't really conveyed as well as they need to be to the person responsible for finding a position role, HR. They're being given the classification, I need this much education, this much work experience, any relative information associated with this, blah, blah, blah. And that's the checkboxes that the HR will go and chase after. But we've talked about it before. It never flipped over to say, and what do we give to get this? What is it that we're offering the people to be interested in this role? And that's where you talk about the things about goal centric and what is it that it benefits you, and what are your goals, and how you want to be treated, and what is your culture that you're participating in, and so forth. So, yes,
people want to have a self-expression, creative. They want to feel creatively expressed. They want to feel part of a winning team. All of those fit into the laws of our human needs as well. I just put in a link to the article in Hotel Recovery where Jason Fried, who's great, interviewed Michael Levy from Citizen M Hotel, and he's great. And, he talks about the reversed pyramid where the line staff employees are at the top and the leadership is on the bottom supporting them. The line staff are the ones that are responsible for, making sure that the guest experience is great for every single guest. And if they need something to get something accomplished in order to make that happen, their bosses are there to support them, not to dictate to them how to get it done, but to tell leadership what we need to get it done. And so those people surely feel great about being there because they have that being creatively expressed. They're part of the solution. They are what brings that company up to the highest level. And it actually, the whole article is very interesting. Actually, the last part lost me. I'll need Lauren, you to explain to me.
I'm going to go look at it now. I have not seen the article. And you're right. Jason, as a matter of fact, you just reminded me. I sent him a note because Jason has been on our show many times before as well, but it's been a while. And I want to catch up with him as to his transition for what he created Hotel Recovery for back when he had nothing to do. And literally it was because of, okay, I got nothing to do. What can I do to be more relevant to where he has grown into where it is now and what he's transitioned to and from. And be just good to catch up with him. Plus also too, with the TV channel and everything else like this is that, it could be a great forum for him to continue on with what he does. Cause he has always been a wonderful writer in relationship to our industry. He has had many roles within our industry from a journalist perspective. I mean, when he was with Smith Travel and so forth, and what he did with Skip, he's written articles persistently over the years, and very insightful person for someone that's not truly been working within the industry from the industry's perspective all his life. He has a very keen perspective on the industry for all the people that he's involved in and worked with and so forth. So yes.
It's great.
Yeah.
And he has a great podcast. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yes. No, it's been a joy to see him grow from what he was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do, to where he's fully found his ground and done well with it and stuff like that. By no means trying to sell anything short to all this. I've also decided to think that rather than always try to push to where we have the limits of 2 hours every day, I'm like, if we're good with what we've talked about, we're good for the day. But by the same token, I don't want to cut it short. If you feel that there's something you brought to the table that you want to make sure we talked about, I have the pleasure of having you on the show, or us being on the show together. It's not my show, it's our show. is there something that you want to make sure we got to talk about today that we hadn't got to from our dialogue so far?
No, the only thing I wanted to maybe just add something to what we were talking about before,
Okay.
what Tim said about, being clean and friendly. I can tell you that I have read a lot of reviews for the months of June and May, and I can tell you that there are so many one-star reviews saying dirty, dirty,
Mhm.
dirty. It's terrible. Why? I mean, let's at least, if we can't do anything else in the hospitality business, especially in these days, why do we still have so many complaints like this? I mean, I know that this is a tough time for housekeeping, but I mean, that is our baseline that we shouldn't, if we don't have time to do that, we shouldn't let anybody into the room. It just
It's
broke my heart.
it's unfortunate, but I think our industry is turning into a mirror of our society in some ways, and that is if we can blame something, it's at least not us.
Mhm.
We go to a restaurant now, and the first thing from the server isn't the joy of seeing us. And I'm being very general. Not all places are like this, and not all hotels are the way you describe them. I mean, but there is a growing size to this number where the restaurant's first words are, "We're sorry, we're limited in service, or we don't have a full staff," or whatever the rationale of what you're about to experience is probably not what we would like you to have, or what we used to have, or what you think you should have. Just take what you can get is the premise of that kind of statement. Okay. We don't have the people that we normally have. We don't have the capacity we used to have. We don't have the service level we have, whatever it is. It certainly does not reflect in the price. Price is you better pay this for what we were lucky to have given you, is the attitude that our industry is giving right now. This is our rate. Terribly sorry, but hey, the pandemic, and as long as we can push it to some other, deflect the anger to some other cause, like it's not us. Hey, we'd love to do better, but we can't. I think a lot of it is they won't. Rather, because here's my rationale with this. Instead of doing the business that you can provide that level of service that you would want to give the guest, you're instead taking their money for what you can give the guest. And so they're selling past their service levels. I keep saying this over for a hotel's perspective. They're doing the same in restaurants, and they're marginalizing what they're selling, but premium pricing what they're giving. What's Richard say? Because we are greedy, exactly. Too few associates thought they'll want to be occupied service and cleaning both suffer. Completely agree with you, Richard. And to Ed's point earlier on, the companies that are most reflective of that mindset are REITs. They're the ones that are just driven by profit and margins of investment than they are about hospitality and service scores. And I think also was pointed out in the earlier conversation, Richard, and I don't know if that happened before you joined us. It's because brands aren't pushing back hard on them either, because there's too much of a relationship with them. They can't push back on a higher portfolio ownership. And honestly, brands have no ground to stand on because they've been so bad at this process. And whether you want to blame them for being structurally inefficient on this or not, I blame them for a lack of adaptability, and I blame them for responsiveness. And I blame them for the reaction to what they did by how they furloughed and how they diminished their service abilities by cost savings first, and then let's evaluate it after we've cut our costs. I think that a lot of companies that are doing well now, and this has been pointed out persistently, both Adele and the numbers you've talked about, and in business, the hotels that didn't furlough their people are not having a problem. The companies that took care of their people during the downturn are not having the same scale of problems. Not saying they don't have problems, but they're not having the same scale of problems. And the same places that maintained their integrity through the pandemic, as it is ongoing, are not having the same service issues either. It's the hotels and the businesses that did respond the way we're talking that are now trying to rebuild and not get back to staff, because the staff are saying, yeah, no, we kind of see your true colors now. And for the companies that are trying to cover their costs and above service, which is what we're talking about also, they're the ones that are like, oh, we can't do what we say we want to do. Yeah, and I'm not all businesses are fitting into these generalizations. I know there's some hotels that are trying to get back. They had to cut people, and they're good intended, and they're trying to do their best. I know that there's exceptions to what I just said, but again, there's too many larger numbers that suggest that the generality of my statement is still valid. That there are businesses that are just doing that. So anyway, so Adele, yes, to that end, golly, you don't know any more podcasts coming up?
You know what? I'm going to have to record something today.
No worries.
I'm going to have to record something today because I didn't do any interviews this week. But so I'll have my first solo.
Okay. And also, I am soliciting open now. We're going to transition the sales podcast to being guest host driven. So I'm going to start looking for experts in the field of hospitality sales to become guest hosts to run the podcast for whatever topics that they want to generate and bring into the podcast. For consistency, I think we're doing that. I think, in all fairness, Holly, who had been the consistent guest host for that, is just being, and we all are facing this. We're seeing this by the attendance we have for co-hosts. We're seeing this on people are busy for a variety of reasons, and some people can and can't make it based on those demand cycles. And Holly is no exception to that. She's been very busy and successfully busy with her training programs with HSMAI, her and Dan Waxman together, and she finds it a struggle to be consistent with sales podcasts. And so she's surrendered saying, hey, look, if you feel that there's a way we can cycle through other co-hosts that are skilled and keep the integrity of the sales podcast, she's all for it. So we're going to start putting out an open request for people that are skilled in sales that wish to bring up a topic under the podcast banner for sales. All they have to do is record the podcast and review it with us as to the content. And if meets mustard, then we will put it in the podcast cycle. So with that in mind, speaking of podcasts, where can they find yours and you?
You can find my podcast at adelegutman.com. And then from there, you'll see the Hospitality Reputation Marketing Podcast, Get Great Reviews, where I usually interview people, but sometimes I'm going to be on my own, just sharing some tidbits with you on how I had the number 1, number 2, number 3, and number 4 hotels in a row on the top of TripAdvisor in New York. Out of hundreds of hotels, the number 1 hotel in the world on TripAdvisor for 2017, and the highest guest satisfaction of any luxury hotel brand in the world year after year, according to Review Pro. And any business, doesn't even have to be a hotel, can get great revenue boosting results by focusing on the guest experience. It drives loyalty, not only to your guests, but for your employees. So it's a really important topic right now. And anybody that thinks that they're saving money by cutting corners, in the long run, it is not a profitable or nice way to do business. It is not going to sustain your business for the long term. So anyway, yes, so you can find the Hospitality Reputation Marketing Podcast on Audible, on Amazon, Spotify, anywhere you like.
And I think we already got a featured co-host for sales. Richard's going to jump in, which would be awesome because Richard, talk about qualified, I'd say so. With that in mind, and Richard, we need to talk also on the hospitality TV channel. Strangely enough, today, I think I've told you this before, Del. You know how much we simulcast everything. We're on Facebook, multiple places, Twitter, multiple places, LinkedIn, one place because LinkedIn restricts that, YouTube, multiple places. We're also on Roku. We do the show here today. We do that live on the free side of the channel, Hospitality Channel TV. So that's on Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Prime Video, and Google Play. We're also an app for iOS and Android, so you can watch us on the phone, you can watch us on tablets, iPads, whatever. And then we have the subscription side, which we're building content for right now, for the paid service, like Netflix. You pay $4.99. It's all on-demand stuff. We're getting a lot of food and beverage, and I want to make sure that's balanced because we're getting a lot of really cool food and beverage content suggestions or submissions to putting it in there. I want to make sure it's balanced with other things. And I say this in front of our audience here, but also we're also on a platform called Twitch. And I don't know whether I told you this, Adele. The reason why I put ourselves on Twitch is because now we broadcast on Xbox and PlayStations, because a lot of people use their game box for watching Netflix and watching Hulu and watching these on-demand, what's called OTT TV. And so we get a live audience. And strangely enough, today, we had around 60 some odd people watching us on Twitch. Now, I don't know who they are because in all honesty, I picked the platform because of its distribution to the game station platform market. Twitch is usually related to gamers, people that play games and they want to broadcast while they're playing the game for other people to watch. But it's also turned into a channel like this where people share content, where they will do shows and put things on there. And so that's why I want to make sure we're there. So I'm going to go try to dig some stats up and see who these people are and why they were deciding that all of a sudden today, Twitch has high popularity. Numeric, some people watching in live sense. So I'll go take a look at it. Anyways, with that in mind, for everyone to know, you can we'll rebroadcast this show at 11:30 a.m. Sydney and London time, as we normally do each week on Wednesdays. You can find us on all the platforms I just mentioned. We also have the Hospitality Marketing Podcast, which I'll be doing a quick recap of the show on today as well. There's the Hospitality Sales Podcast, Hospitality Meta Search Podcast, which Dean Schmidt, who said he was busy today, was not able to join the show. So Dean, we miss you. We also have the Hospitality Revenue Management, which we're hoping Lily, having come back from her Mexican adventure and dealing with the family that she's dealing with, we'll hope that she gets back into her cycle of podcasts. She has been very busy to produce her latest podcast for revenue management. When she does, though, it is brilliant material, and all the old revenue management ones have been incredibly applicable because she has done them through COVID. So all those are applicable processes. So with that in mind, you can see this show at hospitalitydigitalmarketing.com/live, but more importantly, you can see it at hospitalitychannel.tv or talktravel.tv. So Adele, with all those disclaimers and everything else, thank you so much, as always.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much.
We will see you next Friday.
Have a great weekend, everyone.
Thanks, Adele. Bye, everyone.
Think backwards as to, well, what steps do I need to be doing, even if it's just a little bit every day to work towards that. I think Amy says that it takes like 12 calls before, an agreement is made on actually having a piece of business. People think they give up at 1, 2, 3 calls, but actually it takes much longer.